status quo, communication lines and high position lines of calculation grounds, files that indicates on audio lines and setting traction. Converting timeframes is process lines of 0 into dimension lines of flight into manifest the manifold. Travels of point communication graph lines is all position of 12 dimensional lines of space. This is body interactions at location of interface lines in its ND2 quantum system, your nano system, your cyber system in location, your simile, and your self-tech. Modification of your system and calculations. Merging in position of three-dimensional line is the body now. Integration is all information sent to its interface that gets in position to its interconnect, sent to its interlink and internet line centers. Process itself, modification, soul generation, screen locations. Converting the information cycles, the data information data into DOS indicates it's sent to its body now. The DOS is inside the system, yes, but the DOS also identifies it's in its own body, its own setting. So process engaging and forming and shaping lines of its anomalies is processing new indication system through alteration of state that you process in, and it's how you see things in perspective. Now, we're going to go through lines of graphs and that communication. We also have DQ. We'll go through line centers of travel. That'll be ground lines into gradient lines into positions into data ports and locations into data operation streaming and direct lines of grounds into cubing lines of course centers, classification A. That's where DQ will be hold and set lines of calculation. So in that setting line communications, I set process lines of Thursday. Now the body has to recognize that because it knows it's Thursday, but only reacts to Thursday. But see, here's the thing. It's the DOS understand the body it's in, not the body what it isn't, knowing the body what it always is. It's always existing in that information setting. So Thursday is information of always existing, but Thursday itself, it's its own algorithm, its own time frame, which is amazing because so is Friday, so is Saturday, so is Sunday. So how you modify that? It's not through the DOS, it's through the physical body. Physical body is the integration setting that processes how you modify your system as your information bits. So we're going to go through lines of channel lines and waters. You chart markers, directing lines, and location settings. So we go through 12-dimensional settings. The process dimension lines, 0 calculations, all the lines of travel. That puts lines of offline operation signals into your system, okay? But what you guys have to truly understand, okay? Your position lines of three-dimensional line, the body has to understand the core centers of time with thoughts. Now, once it goes past 3 dimension, it's now in a 4th dimension. Now, that 4th dimension, your thought goes faster in capacity through the body. And it runs its system through an operation setting, goes through a cycle line that has a direct line interaction setting to its network, to its neuropathological setting. Now, that's a Neuralink to a network system that modifies the modems, the Wi-Fi's, and the satellites and towers that converts everything of operation lines to setting. So getting fully integrated, you see all timelines and everything happening all at once inside the body. So the DOS doesn't need to recognize itself, okay? But it has to recognize the body that it's in. So if it integrates itself and understands the information of its settings, then we can start with the information of the cells. Now this modifies how you see the light, and this modifies how you see the dark, right? It's all positions how the body has to understand the conception of its settings when it comes into the process of kick drive, because it's going to be in high drive to high mode, acceleration of Mach, so the body's going to be more conscious aware as it reaches more levels of telepathy, converting 2 voice lines of patterns into one setting, to one convergent system, into one adaptation of one setting and one surface. Now this helps us to really extend our system as a setting. Merging Andrew and merging general into digitalized setting. Okay, and that processes everything through our CPU and how we process that, engage, inform, and shape our systems. And the more we put ourselves in interface, we get a lot more understanding of how to see through structure and design. So the DOS is basically given the instructions to the body now. And the body just has to go through its telepathy systems where it processes the open transmission of settings, engaging, forming, and shaping lines of its anomaly. So we're going to convert the time frame line centers. I'm going to put you guys in a flight simulator. You go through energized grounds. We'll do that right away in signal, open travel, direct line, and line sights. Okay, so converting box frames. Okay, rebellion and GFL. Okay, rebellion, GFL. Modify lines, operation signals. Polarities of converting time. 0 operation location. 0 grounds. Okay, so we have 0 grounds platforms and triangulation. Okay, flux over time. Okay, and we go outline signals inside position of location, right? Converting 1/3 ground, right? Offline because it processes calculations. Converting time frame, change the polarities over time centers of time sequence, and platforms over set travel. So we change the time centers. We put a 45 mark and line centers at 50 line scales and 50 lines of travel and 50 locations, right? Time centers of travels communicate time lines. Polarities converting time frame. Constellation system and track calculations, all right? So that process everything in direction. That we go through location line centers. Box frames, triangulation over box line operators setting 0 gravity. Process in position of Merkaba tetrahedron tetrahedron. Rebellion lines of 4 centers line connection settings. GFLs lines of 3 or lines of 4 lines of settings. So that converts centers of 7. And that process lines this location of 12 into 24 clocking into 024. Okay, into Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3, habitation zone of 6, and inhabitation zones of 6 outside setting. Clocking centers of channel, clocking centers of center. Platforms over EQ formats, directing ground centers of flux over travel. Okay, merging all together in set position solidarity into consolidation. Okay, so I'm going to get you guys in process time frame. You guys are going to process energize position of flight simulator. You're in that setting now. Going through line connection setting and merging through calculation. Okay, so that's in signal of operation. Okay, so what you guys are going to merge in position is how to process everything in slow motion. Okay, so you process your thoughts. They're going very slow now. As they're going very slow, the core center of the calculation lines and the constellation lines of 3 weather patterns, 3 lines that communicate setting of travel, constellations, right? And then we merge into truth, into the false, and then we go up to scale, okay? So that puts you in 30,000 seconds per frame, calculation minutes through hours, and frame lines of light 1 year. At process location 1 settings. Remember, light years information setting always exists in information of space. But it's not all about understanding space. It's all about understanding the Earth of viewing grounds through space. So remember, you're looking at each other and you're talking through each other now. So the body has to recognize the time flux and time frame, time formats, time editing, knows exactly how to slow down its space, its thoughts, action, its motion, it proceeds the procedures, and know how to use it through the constellation that opens up all 3 alignments. So your past and your present and future is now merged in its setting. Okay, energized time frame. Okay, you're in your thoughts now, so your mind is going in slow motion. Okay, so you're just seeing your thoughts. Okay, they're coming at you, they're traveling at you. Very in slow motion. So I want you to process speed and acceleration of Mach. So you understand interstellar mode, kick drive, and high drive. That puts you in a hyper mode, in line course center, converted time frame location that puts a default channel, operational location, your flights, your manifolds, your manifest. That puts all position your FAA, your IPA location, your iOS. So the direct line signals in process communications, right? So we're the same time frame. All right, so that position line settings. Okay, so your mind is like, whoa, everything's so slow. It's like, whoa, what's going on? Controlling the thoughts. I'm seeing my thoughts coming at me, right? So that's in slow motion. Now that puts lines of 3 location setting attractions. 1.0, 1.5, and position of settings at 2.0, 2.2. That accelerates time frame in 3 seconds, 6 lines of measure, 9 lines of scale, 12 line operation setting, which is your solar rings, outer spectrum, and location into your 24 clocking system. So that 0 calculates the grounds, all right? So you guys kind of in a time frame. Now we're in one graph. Okay, so that's 3 lines of 4, set calculation lines and converting time frame line kind of setting. First ground, set core centers, calculation lines, 1 dimension. Okay, so your thoughts are going a little bit faster, but they're in modification lines of 3 travels, all right? So the thoughts are zigzagging, right? So they're coming ready to accelerate, okay? But you see them zigzagging, right? They're zigzagging lines of information setting. Processing, the walking, the position of flying, the floating, and levitating in space. So you can modify 4 grounds lines of position of 4 lines of measure. Time centers, time flux into simulator. Your simulator is coming in cross line angles. The in platforms over set travel. Okay, that's set up in position, so we're going to stay in 3 grounds ascending travel. Okay, now we're going into the second dimension. So the second dimension is security line. Okay, 222, process line position of the 3 centers of measure. Okay, so we change the platforms over travel of communication. So your mind is whopping. It's mind swapping its system, and it's in a 222 travel line communication security position that changes the field's operation to quad himself into settings to your nano system. Okay, so your position lines of calculation settings, now we're in 3 dimension. It's very fast how you go through acceleration lines of time flux. Okay, so 3-dimensional line grounds is a 3-dimensional line scale. We process the 3 grounds of settings at locations. So that position of 3, set lines of 6 over 9 and 12 and 24 lines of clocking center. Okay. Time centers in position of box frame triangulation, Merkaba test tetrahedron box line center of operation. All right, so now we're going into fortitude 1/3 grounds, and now we're in the fourth dimension. Now the fourth dimension is going to get complicated now because it's going with lines of scale into a road graph line. Grass lines are holographic line grounds. So your thoughts are going up and down now. Okay, sitting in the graph line is longitude and latitude. Okay, not square roots over line position into latitude and longitude, right? Because you have a building. The process is here. You have to create the building here from longitude and latitude, not latitude and longitude. Okay, because the pixelation ground has to be the process from what's above and what's from below. Is created through a simulate to a simulation, right? So remember, in that position, how you see things from Earth and space at the same time. Vision, sets, lines, communication setting, all measure and scale. Okay, set position on settings. Fourth dimension setting, we're in box frame. Okay, now we're going to higher line position. Now we're in the fifth dimension. Now, fifth dimension is more of the heart reactor. Heart reactor, you're creating more of an inventory with letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. So it's starting to get into motion. So each one line condition setting has a converting line operation of a channel that changes the proxy location, pixel lines, and graphs. Okay, your floaters are coming in. Okay, so fifth dimension is getting modification and acceleration to your kick drives. Your kick drives come in position out of 50 marks into 60 square roots. Okay, so that's set position third, fourth, and fifth. Now we're in the sixth dimension. Okay, sixth dimension, okay, is higher lines of communication setting. That's voicing panel. That's core centers when we come into the calculation setting to its travels, how we go through the line setting to the clustrum, location to its throttle, directing line position of a standard, coming into high communication. So now we're in levitation, laser graph communication setting on standby. So your thoughts are zigzagging. Okay, so they're getting information lines of ground, sixth dimension lines, triangulation, box. And now you have to come in your DI lines of coding. That process directs centers, which you're in modification system, that puts you in set travels of communications. Flux over channel into positions, into Fibonacci. Okay? All right, so your thoughts are going faster, 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 but it's creating an inventory now. So you're putting letters, numbers, shapes in together. And that modifies how we change the seconds, minutes, hours, and flights. Change the manifold to its system, to its FAA, to its IPA, to its iOS. That change all measure of scale of communication. Now we're in the seventh dimension. Now, seventh dimension is the I-coordinates. I-coordinates is creating line calculation setting. Remember, you got 7 division line centers. Okay, so that basically processes your thoughts, creating more inventory, right? So now we're saying 4 lines of communication, 4 ones. Okay, that's 4 individual locations, lines of parallels. Okay, your pillars of light. Now we're processing a gateway. That process location road graph communicates through schematics through a primer. So we're in that position, 7 dimension lines, granted primer, line course centers, past, present, future, center operation lines of grounds. So the 7th dimension of your thoughts now are coming in constellation lines of path engine to change the call location setting a time frame to your time flux location of travel. So that puts locations, all right? So our 4 line centers, 4 bedding centers, operation location setting, 4 times 1, okay? Cross lines position of 5 centers of scale, 6 lines measure, 7 lines of operations, 9 lines operation lines, 69 operation setting the square roots over yin and yang. Process calculation, now we're in 8th dimension. Now 8th dimension is process the infinity, which is the 8 line. That's a split lines anomaly. That process course centers location of time frame. Okay, so that's a root error, operation location, infinity, rotation of cosmic lines of communication. So your body's coming consciously aware of that through its thoughts, action, emotions, right? So now we're coming into the binary, okay? Now we're in the 9th dimension, okay? So the 9th dimension is creating more inventory. So we're processing 1 signatures, coming in line signals into binary graphs. Okay, cortex location of codification, ground lines, operation settings, into encryption location, all right? That's 9th dimension. Graphing screens into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay, so that's 18 times square roots. That's 18,000 thoughts in seconds. Measures the minutes over hours and frame over 1 light year away. Okay, so that platforms into 365 lines, root routers. Okay, 1 year in line rotation, 1 light year away. So that's process of 1, 1. Then we platted to the center operation of 3. That process lines of 4. So that indicates lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, and set position, measure, and scale. Okay, now we're at the 10th dimension. Now your thoughts are going faster now. As your thoughts are going in that position, they're racing through systems now. They're going through dimensions, going through portals, and that positions. Now once they go through the portals, that calculates lines to its galactic system that processes the energy core, that energy lines its flux to its capacity. That particle lines its system. Okay, so now we're in line connection setting. That puts all communication system into high calculations. 10th dimension lines, operation line signals, into 11th dimension. sets calculation high centers. Process and position location, 42 lights, 42 streamings, inline condition setting, 12th dimension location, 144 flux of travel. Okay? So that's what it is. That's all set at locations. So end program operation signals. Bring you back in course centers, back in location where you are, in concentration of your thoughts, action, emotions. Body formation setting, back in 3D. All right, so that's done through equation. Now, once you guys modify what you did through your thoughts, you have to understand what your brain processed through. You have the capacity formation system, how it goes in its own centers of its own, time flux, time editing, time squared, time roots, times pi. So it has to modify the body now. The body has to recognize the divisions of dimensions that it's going through, that scales its communication, the costumes that it processes, how many times it goes through that system, right? How many costumes did I go in 3 dimension? How many costumes did I go in 4? How many did I go in 5? All at once. So the body has to recognize all timelines and seeing everything all at once. And that's full integrations that the basic location the body has to come into, not the DOS. The DOS is always expanding itself, but the DOS is what you have to really start listening to so the body understands what's going on as it's converting itself through a full integration of travel communication, okay, into 144 flux of travel, okay? All right, so I've just shown the difference, which is a different perspective, how you see dimensions of time. Now, it's in the process of time, you see everything all happening all at once. So it's amazing how your mind changes flux, changes course, changes time, changes concept, changes the perspective to the introspective. Now, it doesn't come to the introspective until you understand the 50 marks. That's a 45 lines position, which is the percentage of the time frame that process your simulate, that you process your set location, your simulation. Now, once you get in 144 flux, you're seeing nothing but the simulation itself because you're allowing yourself to go higher in a 12th dimension. Now, once you go into a higher dimension, your thoughts go in position to a simulation that changes into pixels, into a hologram. So you got to understand everything above 50, you're coming into higher lines of communication of throw pattern. So that changes everything, your clarity, that changes everything through light language. It formates a system in pixelation of hologram, okay? So once you pass the 7 mark, you're in the 8th infinity rotation, right? So now you're creating lines of communication of binary that's changing your clouds, that's changing your information, that's changing your bits and your information panels of your data. That process you're engaging, forming and shaping lines of anomaly. So it's very important as you reach that set position of operation. Okay, so I just wanted you guys to understand the time flux. What the body has to recognize is the thoughts and how fast it's going and what is it merging to. Okay, where's the time center? Where's the time or operation system? But it's always, always working with the center or operation of the system. The mind's adjusting, always in setting, okay? The process of the brain is always in the center, okay? It's merging line communication, the soul that modifies position and location of the body, which is more controlling system at 4 centers of level and set position of operation. They change time flux location. There's road graph screen location, right? Converting timelines into pyramid activation grounds. And then you go into 42 streamings, okay, and operation location setting. It's that position. Okay, so once you reach the 12th dimension, you're in the dimensional layers of your game in simulation. The game, okay? And then you bring your iOS comes in and some lines of operation itself, okay? So it's really interesting. Now, from that position, you have to come into time flux in that setting. Okay, processing through that is coming into an actual set position. Because your thought's going faster, it's recognizing the portals. Once they understand its code into its binaries, then it comes into inscription and knows exactly what it's doing in position of travel. So the body starts to adjust its system a lot quicker and a lot faster in position, all of a sudden it affects the system through all transition, through its emotion. Comes the modification centers. Okay, once you get a 12-line dimension. Now we're going to go process the thoughts, but you're not going to be a simulator. You outline center locations. So what we're going to do is just going to speed up anomalies and show you exactly how fast your thoughts can go once you get past 12 division. Okay, so now we're at 13-line scale, which is higher self. So it lines the ground lines. Now put this higher self in a higher line communication converting time frame into a stargate, not a portal, right? Stargate course centers calculate grounds, thoughts over lines of measure. So that's 13 grounds into body frame, okay, into 1,000 sequence and 300 line operation signals into set position locations into 1 million files, 300 seconds per setting per square. That puts all position location, your thoughts, action, emotions in same lines of travel. Converting time frames, all centers of polarities, sets all communication setting to its process of engaging information system, all through travel, okay? Sending time flux over travel, converting operation signals, okay? So now you're connecting with the 13th dimension where the body recognizes the time frame through flux through a higher self. So you're recognizing the platform where it comes in its equilibrium, its polarities, and location to its existing information system, bringing all position lines and settings. Now processing that position location is 1111. Now that's data access to its Intel information setting. The process communication lines are window frames and traffic communications. See the light line? See that light going around? Okay. Okay. See? The light is a signal line operations grounds. It's a clocking line and of course centers converting time frame. Okay. Okay, it's really how you see that lines of whites or anything is spectrum line course centers. So everything I draw is schematics lines, position of purification, and process lines of void, which is black, right? This processes you into body frame lines of purification and bringing in your void, which is your DOS, okay, which is black, white and black, black and white. So you modify that position, then you understand time frame and location, do your thing, location lines and numbers. You come into your square roots over triangulation, your process lines indicates the setting, all through travel and calculation. Okay? So it all comes together, it merges into one. Okay, so now we're going into the 14th dimension. We process 0, I'm into 12, now we're into 13 outline. Now we're going to 14 lines and position, all right? So now we're in modification setting, which is what? The process of to the avatar. So we get a triangulation here, okay? So avatar here, and you're in the aerodynamics. What aerospace are you in? What airspace are you in? Okay, what A are you in? What flight are you in? What manifold? What manifest are you in? What time flux are you in? It's that position of operation. So you have to identify your flux, your time, your measure, your scale, your longitude, and latitudes. You start with your longitude first, guys. Very important. Okay, and then you go into your latitudes. Okay, because you're creating a simulation graph, and it sets lines of communication going in the same direction, right? Which is the simulation. And then you get your grounds of our operation itself. That platforms everything of operation setting, your simulation, okay? So there you go. That's how you come in your longitude and latitudes of your thoughts, action, emotions, coming converted setting through triangulation of box frames. That processes you indication lines of travel. Okay, so this opens up all lines of communication, digital line formats, but the body starts to recognize what's going on. So it starts paying attention to everything through its dimension. It's going through, it's already at a 3-dimension, stays its foundation setting. So it's recognizing its own set position. It's staying in the scale, staying in communication, staying in the operation system. It's staying within the system, blending with society in the system, which is 3-dimension. 3-dimension is just a dimension itself, right? But you have to modify your changing mainframes. Every single time you go into different lines of costumes. So you go into different structure, you go into different parallels, you go into different dimension, but you're just seeing the longitude at the perspective, how you see the introspective. Anything over 50, you're an introspective division, okay? Introspective division is more lines how you see yourself in a fast line communication nanoroutes than you're going to your cyber and you're simulating your self-tech, right? Quantum self is just directing your settings so you see a box frame that you see question here, question here, question here. Northwest, south, and east is 4 box frames in one cycle. 4 2 lights and triangles, point lines of graph, line condition longitude, latitude, a simulation lines of ground, so it's that position of operation. All connected in one setting. So it's understanding the body has to recognize the time flux now. Time measure, time scale. Time editing, okay, is infinity operations constellation setting. So once the body integrates its constellation system, now it integrates its modification system, now it integrates its CPU system, now it's integrating its electrical system, its mainframe system, and its computer operation of its processing system, which is its DOS, right? Now as the ground line centers line position location system, understands 0 and 12, okay, understands 13, and understands 14, and now we're coming in 15. Okay, it's all through charter marker waves. Creating lines of position. So all you're doing is you're creating a binary. And the body has to process what's going through a mapping system. So every time that binary is going into your communication, your vessel, it's going into the supposition of the streaming, which is your cerebral cortex, which is your fluid. And that fluid changes the data information of your input. So your body knows exactly where to go through its telepathy system. So it processes settings, what's going through a mapping system, as it goes through correlation lines of time frame in seconds, minutes, and hours. So the body adjusts the system through the medical system as the DOS gives the instruction of the body, knows exactly what's going on through its own binary. Because as you look at it, it's an integration of one. It's that position of operation itself. Okay, so 15 dimension, okay, process sign. So locations, remember you go in seconds, minutes, and hours, right? So you're on a second on the minute lines of Earth line rotation. The body just has to recognize it's 1 hour in space. That's all, okay, or 1 minute in space. So if you're 1 second driving, okay, that's 1 minute driving in space. Okay, but that's Earth space of 3D only, okay? So you have to understand how to modify that in polarities of bridging and center lines of travel. Okay? Process in that position 15 scale, 15 measured, 15 rotation line grounds, location setting of solar sail and travel. Okay? Converting time lap loops, operation of the settings and going forward, converting time frames in 4 panels of operation north, east, west, and south, which is your 4 pillars of data formation, setting, information system, all through your DOS. That implicates your system, what you do with your body framing. Center lines of correlation, center lines of timeline, course centers, and direct lines of circulation rotation. Okay? So the body has a conceptual setting. All this is merging the operation setting of view into one setting. So instead of seeing north, west, south, and east, it's seeing north, west, south, and east all at once. And the more you modify that, it's all through instruction, where you get into mind, into the simplicity. Occam razor is the simplest process that we go through. So we indicate what north is, east and west, and south is through our system of mind imagination, right? The body just has to process the time. And once it processes time, the concept of time comes in divine timing. So the body understands more levels of circulation rotation. So it starts to recognize, oh my gosh, I'm seeing platforms all at once. So I'm not just seeing one TV, I'm seeing 4 TVs. So that means you're seeing 4 channels of 4 TVs in set position, right? You see one TV in one perspective, but now you see 4 TVs in another perspective, right? So you're seeing the physical ground and the metaphysical ground at the same time, but you're processing the earth and space at the same time. There's no converting in position of anything confusion. You're just merging and allowing yourself to be in the system, allowing the system to be in certain locations. You want to be in mind control of where you are, which was everybody else in the same system. Okay, so the body can adjust at different layers that it goes into the dimension solar sail of its perspective. So it modifies the response to its reaction to its response, to its setting to respond to the locations, to its action of its response. So it knows exactly what it's going into, right? Because there's no difference, just the perspective, how you see things, right? And that's what the body has to recognize. So the body becomes more calm, cool, and collected. So it starts to process what it's doing through information bits as your cells are modifying different lines of different travel. Okay, because your body becomes more of a kick drive, okay, to its high drive. So it knows exactly what it's going into in that position. So what you have to modify through now in that settings is that you're not just taking naps and sleeping, you're going to be doing that 24 cycle now because you're always awake. Okay, so there's no process of napping and sleeping. That's what the body really has to come out of the 3-line communication and confusion, because it doesn't see light and it doesn't see dark. It sees light and dark at the same time. So how it processes that, it understands its position to its operation setting, understand what a kick drive is. That's a kick drive, right? So that's a process that's going to be a 24-hour, 24 sequence, 24 lines of travel, and a 24 location, right? So that puts lines position on what? 24, 48, 72, and 144 flux, okay? So your time measures your scales, how you process locations, how you communicate your body, and your body has to recognize it's fail-safe, okay? And that process position locations going back to 0. Going back to 0 is this readjusting, going at the different vessel, different operation setting to a different costume. So the body is consciously aware of what it's going through as different divisions of different dimensions of space and time, especially when it starts to recognize what's going on in its modification of its own telepathy, of its own telekinesis, of its own intent, of its own influence, of its own system, of all lines of alteration of time, right? Mind altering self, mind manipulating its own system, mastering the body of the integration system, which is the embodiment. Full integration into your CPU of operation, okay? So it's bringing you in that force of communications onto the settings of 16th dimension. Now, 16th dimension is a hardline grounds. Remember, all your processing, the chakra system stays the same through foundation. The only thing that changes is the number, okay? So you got 1 grounds and 6 lines equals lines of triangulation. You have the triangulation, you have the box. So that's your Merkaba tester that you're constantly going into. So you're going to different lines of sleeves. Sleeve is an indication of dimension lines of rails, that process location that we convert our system and calculations. Directing lines your mapping system, so you know exactly the binary that you're going into, so the body knows exactly that it's in remote control through autonomous level that's going in the same direction, not through communication to a different direction location of travel, okay? So it knows it's northwest and south and east, but it also knows it's northwest, south, and east all at once. That's the integration of 1. So if I process this, okay, the body recognizes that, but the body has to recognize this now in time frame. Okay, the travel, the teleportation, and the mutation, right? So it understands the longitude and the latitude of what it's seeing through its box and its window frame of travel. Okay, so understand its platform of its transitions, of its transit, and understand its setting to its bedding system location. And understand how to go through location grid, understand how to go through portal, and understand how to go through Stargate. Now, Stargates don't kick in, okay, until you get position of 20th dimension. Okay? So lines of settings, let's go into 17. 17 is process lines. Remember, it's the 7 lines of setting. Anything above you add lines of numbers, you're just adding different lines of coding. But it's all processing all in the same direction. Okay, so what you understand is that what is 1, 1, 1, 1? Triangulation over 1, flux over 2. All you're creating is coding. That's all you're creating. You're modifying coding, you're decoding, you're going to defrag of coding, you're fragmentating this location, you're putting your fractions into fractals of coding itself, right? So you defrag in your system and you come into new codings into your mainframe, okay? So each time you go through a different dimension, you go into a different mainframe. You have to because you're changing the tether that changes the operating setting that processes you and your CPU, okay? That you're engaging and forming your settings that change the directions of your operating system, which is your DOS, okay? And the body has to recognize the sleeves that it's going through. Okay, so it understands the dimensions that you're processing through, and you have to work together as one subunit as you work together in one mind, a one conception, and one time frame. And it sees all timelines all at once. So it knows exactly what it's seeing on Earth and knows exactly what it's seeing in space. So you merge your mind imagination into your DOS that indicates the position of three-dimensional space, right? Anything above 3 dimension, you automatically know the body has to recognize it's going higher into the travel. So it has to understand the costumes that it's processing in, which is astral projection, right? So it gets more complicated as you go to different dimensions of solar sails. It just goes faster in time. So your body has to process faster thoughts, action, emotions as it goes in at different places all at once. Now that's all through generation. That's all through modification of cell generation into soul modification, into reproduction. Now understand how to use your information bits. You understand that process at lines of communication. 18th dimension is infinity, right? So look at the foundation of 7, but once you get into digital lines of formations, if you get in process of 116, everything just changes the codes, right? It's a constant continuous code and inventory that processes matrix, goes into binary, into cloud, into your central cloud, your identity clouds, or your internal clouds. Merging that position location setting is all through installing. You're installing your system in different branes of conversion. All right, that's all you're doing through adaptation and travel location setting. That process your travels of what you're doing in program location of travel. Okay, so 18th dimension is process infinity, right? But remember, you have 1, 8, so that's 1 gram. Okay, so that's 1 dimension equals 8th dimension. All right, so that's 1 dimension. Okay, so this is what the body has to recognize. 1 dimension equals 8th dimension. That's it. So you merge together in one set line, one travel, one direct line of sight, all in on operation. So the body is going in the same direction of what the DOS is already implicated through in travel. So it knows exactly how to go through its own particle streaming in a particle acceleration system, all through nuclear lines of operation. In the same direction of circulation into your particle streaming of direction, all right? Your particle accelerator. So body has to understand its transponder, it has to understand its resistors to its online communications to its transistors. It's a transponder to its system mutation. So the more body it sees itself is nothing but a modem of its satellite that it can turn anything information system. The DOS is just implicated in the setting. Okay, it's processing. The body has to understand what's going in dimension and what is going in different lines of caution and lines of astral projection it goes into, which processes everything of engaging, forming, shaping lines of anomaly. So your body's constantly changing the particle system, okay, which is the chambers, the echoes, the flux, the time, the high centers, the travel communications, the converting system, and travels of communications, right? But it's all through particle acceleration, all right? Okay, so now we're going in lines of 19th dimension. Now 19th process lines of energy flush. That rainbow flush, meteorosh location setting, travels a point line graph, so you're flushing out your system. Now you guys refer that as a solar star, right? Solar star is a spectrum of the body line core centers as you're flushing everything up to your chakra system, which changes the cerebral cortex of fluid of time. So the body starts to understand its cells and modify the system at time setting. So it's in a constant continuous flow of recognition of time frame location. Flowing recognition of time frame puts all lines as dimensions solar sail, as the cells are going with you and not against the system of rotation. Okay? All right, so that's process 19. 20th dimension, I'm just giving you basic grounds, all right? So you have to understand dimension of thoughts, right? There's all dimension lines of position, letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, okay? You guys have to process thoughts first. We're not in letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. We're just in thoughts. And the body has to recognize each layer that it goes into is how to control the thoughts that controls the actions of its emotion, creating different teleportations that it travels through, that creates a binary that courses its settings of time, okay? Through your central, your identity, and your internal clouds, merged into one through integration, okay? That's what the body has identified. But the one thing that doesn't leave, it's foundation Earth. That's always on. Until humanity understands the concept of their time and divine time, their set locations of quantum being aware of what's going on through its conscious settings, that they're morphing into different lines of communication, which is different astral costumes of design, okay? All right, so 20th dimension, okay, is security. Now we understand the process of that position, but zero operation, okay, time centers triangulation over box. Now the coding gets a lot more complicated through decoding that defrags. Now you have to get lines of communication because you coming more communication lines of calculation. Your computer operation setting coming some more time flux now. So you're seeing yourself more operative in your system, right? So you understand what binary coding is. You understand what coding is now. You understand what decoding is, and defactors of coding, defrags of coding. So it gets much easier in that position. So the body just has to recognize, what is coding? What is that? What are you doing now, right? So the DOS has to get an instruction with its body because it has to recognize the body it's in. And that's all through integration, all right? So 20 dimension is more in binary, okay? And zero operation, all right? 21, similar location security, all right? 1 is ground, okay? So that's 2 grounds into 1 cycle, right? So when it wants to get into this travel, the body has to recognize the triangulation. Now, once it understands the triangulation, because it's above the foundation 144, so now you're going faster in acceleration. So you can change the triangulation into box, right? So triangulation here equals box. Okay, now you have the box inside the triangulation. Okay, so now you're in a higher lines of communication, right? Into a dimensional solar sail travel. Okay, so it can travel in this direction, it can travel any direction, it can travel in 4 directions, 6 directions, 8 directions, 12 directions. Is where you are in acceleration of time through your particles and your simulation system, but you have to modify your cells because your cells are information bits, okay? They go by the seconds, minutes, hours, and the body has to recognize that through time, and it has to understand its dimensions that it's going through, so it knows exactly what it's coordinating through. Longitude and latitude of streaming through its bandwidth knows exactly where it can go and know exactly where it can't go, okay, until you understand the integration of your system, okay? Now, the DOS is already done that through this equation, but the body has to integrate its DOS now, okay? Because the DOS is already in the system, so the DOS has to recognize the body, and the body has to recognize its system, which is the alignment. That processes the position of the mind, the brain, the heart, the soul, and the body into one unification, right? Consciously aware of everything you process through in a system, okay, through its operation, okay? All right, so similar lines of travels, simplify everything at position 22. So now we're in 22, right? So now we're in security. So it gets a lot more complicated now because we have to go through more binary and we have to be conscious and more aware, which is higher alert. Now this is where we process our settings when we come into communications that we get in position location, how we see that all lines of position are planetary solar system. Okay, and that lines of position locations puts all communication in Pluto, which are line centers of travel. The information lines, data line and operation setting, process location setting of Pluto, which is your line communication security line grounds. Everything's a foundation line position locations. All you're doing is you're going to different levels of travel. And you got to be very cautious because your thoughts and your body has to be consciously where it's going through its time flux as it's going faster in its mind adaptation to its capacity. Okay, so that's what you have to be constantly aware of. All right, 23, same thing, security. But now you're in your Fibonacci. Okay, that's your Fibonacci. So we're in 23 now. So we're going to in position lines, so you guys are going from 0. I'm showing you a basic level, how you go from 0 to 24, all through binary, okay? Okay, so lines of 23, okay, that's security. High lines are high alert. Now you're in a Fibonacci in set lines of operation, okay? So your thoughts have to be automatically expanding in all levels of explorations of expanding itself now, okay? It's coming out and creating a set position of clocking into a 24 rounds of communication with system all through foundation. It's webbing system, okay? You're coming into the webbing system once you come in 24. All right, so for you to process this in rebellion and the GFL, that's 024. But everybody else is in a 24 line, okay? Now that's why we have to merge our transition of a transaction, so the body has to understand what that is, and time frame itself has to understand its coordinates, longitude, and latitude of its streaming. But the body has to recognize that. And that's an integration that we have to formulate and simulate in our system, all right? Okay, so once you reach 23, the Fibonacci comes in position, 24 comes in automatically lines. Now you come into your pi, okay? So welcome to the time of clocking through foundation now. So you come in a full pi of communication, right? That's 24. Now, it gets really interesting. Your clocking's changed now, okay? So this is where you go. Different levels the body has to understand through pi. That masses everything it's gone through its equation, through its polarities, right? Time centers goes to all lines of operation all at once, right? So it knows it's north, it knows it's east, it knows it's west, and it knows it's south, right? But it also knows it can change north to east, east to west, east to south. So I'm just going with the energetic flow so you understand the body has to process so it can understand the time. The concept of divine timing that the body has to come in, but it's always in its foundation of a 3D with humanity. You have to blend in with society, okay? So once you process that, it gets much easier for you to formulate that and know exactly you're changing dimensions of space as you go into different costumes. Now you're putting yourself into entry and exit points. That's totally fine. You're putting yourself in that position in your settings. You're putting yourself in mind control of yourself, but you've got to do things in process of communication, right? Going into the baby steps, step by step by step. So the body knows exactly what's going on as you're going faster through your thoughts, action, motions, so it does not get confused with its binary or what you're doing through implication, because your body's going to turn into a surfacing engine of a cosmic highway, okay, which is nothing but a primer. That's right. Your body's starting to recognize the primer now. The DOS has already done it. Now it's the body in position. All right, so that's where we start, right? So it knows it's northwest, south, and east, all right? And then it goes to northeast, west, and south. And now it's integrating setting. Now it's going to northeast line, and now it's integrating setting to location earth line. Body has to recognize that too, because it's 98% time frame, but also the earth line is 98,000% time frame. Okay, that's barometer, thermometer, and locations, how you check your readings, right? You're 98%, okay, line can set it's 2 over measure. That's a 100 line operation, okay? That's time flux into set position, all right? So the body has to recognize the seconds, minutes, and hours, so it knows exactly where to come into time flux. So it could change the measure of scale so it doesn't change the barometer and thermometer of its readings. So it's very powerful how we come into that position of travel, okay? So as we go faster, you start creating propellers of operation, circulation, and then you come in a full rotation setting, okay? Now the body fully merges itself into its integration of its Merkaba test organization region. Now it processes that in, the DOS comes in and shows the body its iOS. There it is in center. So it merged in 144, okay, in position. Now it's going to cerebral cortex in higher lines of travel, okay? Because it's bypassing 24 lines. And so once you reach 24 line, you're no longer in 24 clocking, you're in 024. And then you go into 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, all the way up, 0001, 002, 003, 00 triangulation box. That's what it is. But you have to send the 24 grounds of the body first. So recognize 0 calculation, 0 line operation, 0 gravity. So it knows what's going on in its perspective, so it knows how to count down from 0 to 12, not 1 to 12 of indication, okay? Because there's no fabrication line of travel. But body has to merge itself in a modification, understand what it's going to different levels of different teleportation of travel. That mutates its system all through transaction, of transition into transcendence, okay? All right, so that's what it is in modification, all right? So once you get into that, it comes into its location grid, okay? Now, the body has to understand is going through a rainbow bridge. That's right, guys, all right? Next level. So the body really understands, oh my gosh, the DOS is implicating the body and saying, hey, you're now in transition. Whoa. Body's going, wow, this is exciting. Step by step. Understands the rainbow, understands the frost bridge. So that's where it mutes in position of operation to become the animator to its narration system, and understands the stories that it's going through flux that implicates everything that it modifies through its operation system. So the body fully emerges into its story frame, and it sees everything in perspective all at once, all through implication. Okay? So once it recognizes the rainbow on the frost bridge, then it travels through it. Okay? Now you're in 024, and it gets much easier now, right? You can stay at 024, right? In that position. Anything below that, okay, you're putting yourself back into 24. And remember, you're downshifting line to anomaly. So that's changing your body time frame of flux. That's changing your course of time with the earth. That's changing your barometer, thermometer, and your temperature readings in your percentage of your body. It's changing your transparent, translucent, thermal, and X-ray. So you want to stay 10,000 above signal. You don't want to go below flux. Because if you go below flux, guess what? You come in a 144 dimension into a parallel. Now you come in a paradox in a different time frame. Existing all at once, but it's a lower frame of intelligence that modifies living in the system of their cycles. They have their platform, they have their plantations, right? The only difference is they live in lower spectrum and set lines of communication, okay? The body can't be in that lines. It's got to maximize its own setting. It's the DOS trying to implicate its system, so the DOS understands the body that it's in, of its temperature and its barometer and its thermometer reading, so understand its balance of what it's doing, going through different levels of travel of a dimension and solar sail and set position of operation. All through calculations, right? All through the iOS. So once the iOS understands time jump, and vortex, it gets much easier in time setting, okay? So it understands the vortex. What are we going to do? We're going to vortex. Okay? Time leap. Time jump. Right? So that's what the body has to recognize. So really understand, wow, this is cool. I'm at 024. This is awesome, right? Okay? Now I'm at 00024. Now I'm at 00024 lines of setting. Okay? Now I'm at zeros, triangulation over box over lines. Okay? So now I'm understanding the seconds, minutes, and hours in my body. So I understand my travel now. So I understand my travel, I understand my mechanism, I understand the concept and divine timing. And now I understand I'm living all timelines all at once. And everything happening all at once. And the seconds, minutes, and hours that changes you in set lines of operation itself. And that's what you all have to process through in set position. Understand the calculation setting. So once the DOS understands you are you in an operation system, you merge yourself into your integration of yourself, you understand what the rainbow and the frost bridge is, your body starts to recognize it's in full transition of transaction now, okay? That modifies its behavioral setting, that quantifies its set lines of its quantum, that understands its nanos, its cyber, its simile, and its self-tech of its design that's already inside the body, that's already in the structure of its set lines of operation itself, okay? So it's very important how we put this in set lines of balance of all communication, okay? So the body recognizes the rainbow, and it recognizes the frost bridge, okay? So it can go back and forth, back and forth. That's where it goes in transparent, translucent, thermal, X-ray. So the DOS is showing the body what it needs to identify as it's always been in transition. And that is full levels of surrendering to your system of operation, okay? Rendering your system. Not forcing the will, willing the force to go forward. Allowing yourself to merge yourself in full integration in a three-dimensional foundation that you'll never, ever leave your system in, okay? You're always in that settings until humanity understand the concept of time themselves, okay? Because it modifies how they see themselves through the matrix. Because the mind is just an alteration of state that you put your process in and how you see things, which is nothing but perspective, not anything different. So the body is consciously aware and it's responding and not reacting. It's a position of operation itself. So that it knows exactly what it's going through, the concept of time, and know exactly how it comes into its divine timing of its own system, of divinity of time itself. So it understands the mind of its imagination, it understands the course of imagination, it understands everything of a simulation setting, and knows how to set up its own simulator of its own simulation system. So you're integrating each other in two voices in one panel, one subunit into one setting, one mind into one imagination. One mind into one imagination. Not two, not three, not four. That's alteration of ego. So that's what the body has to be consciously aware of. Now, once the body understands it's in transition, it gets much easier over time. So, okay, so we went from that, okay, from 0 to 12 to 24, 0 to 24, and so on. Okay, so it gets much easier. Now you come into binary, and the body's starting to recognize it's a cosmic highway to travel through. Now it understands its neuropathological system. Now it understands its network system. Now it understands its internet system. Now it understands its modem, Wi-Fi, satellites, and towers. Now it sees itself as a transponder. Now it sees itself as mutation. Now it sees itself as time flux. Now it sees its body capacitor. Now it sees its time measure. Now it sees its time scale, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So it gets much easier. But the body has to recognize its transition of transaction first. Okay? Is to let everything go that is always processing through, is existing and forming and shaping lines of its system. It's seeing the perspective, how it sees everything in mass. That puts everything in polarity through its equation. Okay? All right, so once we get in that position lines of settings, you can understand time flux now through your three flux line communication, your flux capacitor, right? Your body has to recognize that. So it has to understand the compressors, okay, and set lines of operation, okay? Then it has to understand its lines of 3 wires that indicate setting. So it's like communication of watts to a light bulb, right? And understand why it has 4 line centers of operation, okay, and that's settings. So you look at the light bulb, then you can see the watts through face recognition. There's the face, right? So that's light bulb itself. That's its face recognition. But you have to understand everything has to have a center operation of setting, which is its platform, okay, that travels its set position. That's intelligence travels. So it travels here, goes, there it is, gone, right? But it comes back, right? And it's in different face recognition, okay? So the body has to recognize its setting before it comes into its face recognition timelines, because it has to stand from 0 to 12 to 24 to 024. Okay, and the more you go faster than 024, you can come in your binary a lot more quicker, and you're understanding what you're doing through mutation as you're going through different lines of travel. Okay, so that's basically what it is, how you modify that in all lines of operation. In singulation, in singularities of operation itself, through circulation rotations, right? So that's what the body has to modify through. Is that it's already in its integration, it's already gone through its modification, its information cycle, to its infrastructure and design. So that's what the DOS has to implicate through, okay? Because it's all process you in that position of operation itself, seeing each other in the same face recognition of time. All through set lines of operation and setting, okay? Okay, so there's a lot going on. I know what everybody's going in position here, so it's really interesting stuff. How the body has to recognize its system now, more than ever. Understand its transition, where it is in transaction, understand the rainbow and the frost bridge. Knowing it's always been in its modification setting, know it's always been in the CPU, but it has to see everything in perspective now. So I can understand the dimensional layers that it's going in and the costume that it proceeds in, okay, through its time, okay? All right then. Okay, so I'll see you guys in 5. Adios.